place I left off last time we were taping. When the tape ran out, I mentioned that to use the kind of information that I was talking about regarding my paradigmatic, ad hoc schematic of our brains and dividing it up into a wet function, I was just calling it a wet brain, and a dry function. And I mentioned that to really use this, you had to have a subtle approach. So picking us up there. The subtle approach goes like this. You know the existence, once you've got some feel for what I'm talking about, you know the existence that right here in your head, and it's not simply tropical, that it actually operates. I just made up the terms and call it wet and dry brain, but there are operations going on that people have tried to talk about many, many years. There's always a dichotomous, bipolar setup of all human activities, external and internal. But once you get a feel that this is going on, and that there is this juice continuing to ooze, it is like a swamp, it is like the backwaters, and it is always in motion even when you're in bed asleep. And as it were on top of that, almost materially, if you wish, it's not that important, but the cortical areas, just the few little millimeters on top of the brain, is like, in a sense, a material metaphor for what I'm calling the dry brain. But you've got to have the continuing awareness, you've got to have this knowledge that it's so. And you've got to have the knowledge yourself of the ironclad, money-back futility of you through the dry brain, through words, denouncing, cursing your own genetic makeup, the wet brain, of trying to make promises regarding the wet brain. You have got to understand the futility of that. Now, we still have not come to a period in the sentence now for you people out there getting this at another time and another place on tape. It is not a matter of pessimism, neither is it a matter of optimism. It's a matter of extraterrestrial observation points. That you have got to understand for yourself the absolute futility of the dry brain, that which you normally think of as your own thinking self, your own mortal, conscious, any other adjective you want to throw in, self. That you have got to even go past my little attempted humor of a night ago of pointing out that you have got to be extremely optimistic to believe, to expect that there's going to be any great change in your own genetic makeup through talking to yourself, whether it be through coups, attempts at verbal seduction of yourself, or whether it be just outright aggressive attacks on your own genetic makeup. You've got to understand on that level, going no further than that, that it is futile. Then the subtle approach, I'm going to give you 2 or 3 ways to try and get a hold on this and to see it. But the subtle approach goes along the lines, and keep in mind that you have your own feel, that it's true. It's as though there are 2 brains operating. And it is futile for the one I'm calling the dry brain, the one that talks, the one that's almost as an add-on accessory, that is younger than the wet brain. It's just kind of like a little shower cap. Hopefully not with the little roses, though. And it's on the brain, and it is selectively, but not in any conscious, willful manner. It's selective in that it can only talk and put words on things as fast as you can think and talk. And there's more going on than that down in the depths of this Okefenokee that's your own wet brain. So you got to have all that in mind, and that the futility, generally speaking, of the wet brain, the little part around the dry brain, the little part around the wet brain, attempting remedial lessons and directions to the wet brain, comma. You got to understand that, and then suddenly you move along lines of more enriched, more complex, and more tolerant possibilities. There are similar situations in other places, not here on this planet, but again, they're similar enough, and there's enough of a parallel to the situation here that I can point out in a particular direction going from here. That if you operate under this knowledge, you can begin to live in a way that is less circumstantial. It would be sort of like having this motto, even though, of course, I would discourage you from having a motto if you had to talk about it. But the motto, the slogan, the banner would be, let alone, but under watch. And it would be translated like this: that you have the knowledge yourself that the wet brain normally determines what you feel compelled to do. So it's wet alone. That is the source. You can simply feel it. Or if we had to play with apparent linear knowledge, you can go out the other direction by taking all those things that you can talk about, that you normally think about, and you and anyone else, but especially you people, should then be able, without any doubt, to be aware of the fact that what I am thinking, anything I can talk about, does not seem to be endogenous. It is not, the genesis of what I am talking about is not what I'm talking about. The beginning, the arising of the reality of anything I say I think, that I feel, that I wish, that I regret, without any doubt, even ordinary people feel this, that there is something behind it. Hence, such ideas, among other reasons, as the subconscious, gods, etc. But on anyone just wired up generally to be in the middle class of life should easily be able to feel that. No matter what they call it, that's not important. But that my ordinary consciousness, this inner dialogue, even things I say outright to others and things I say to myself, assuming there is a difference, that there is something even behind those words. For me to say, well, I think so-and-so, I support the Republican Party, or I believe that the whole world would be better if we only had one religion or no religion. Anything I say like that, once it's pointed out, even an ordinary person should be able to easily come to the awareness, at least verbally, to say, all right, I'm not sure why I said that. I can stand here and tell you that I have thought about it, and I've decided after intense reading and study of history that we would be better off without religions based upon these reasons. If you've got several hours, I'll talk to you. But they should, even ordinary people, have an awareness that, all right, I could do that, but insofar as what drives me to say that, what drove me to even make the initial inquiries into history, assuming that they did, I'm not sure why I did it. Who knows why anybody has their interest in life, etc. So you've got to be able, you people, to know that. And that is what is meant by the first part of that little, or that slogan I gave you. Let alone, comma, but let alone, to be aware of the fact that what seems to be, what you think you feel compelled to do, arises there, even if you didn't know anything else about it. If I call it, instead of wet brain, if I call it the black hole of the mind, you should be able to say, all right, yeah. You know, there's something flowing through here, and somewhere behind anything else, X-force, that there is something else. Something seems to always be behind anything that the mind can say. And of course, it's the mind that says that. You ask it, isn't there something, don't you think, behind the words you say, that everything does have a definition or a meaning? Well, yes. And what is it? And then it can only start going in that kind of cyclical manner through the dictionary, or else it would have to, if pointed out to it, agree that, all right, there's probably something behind everything. Something makes me interested in such and such, something makes me take up certain hobbies, and who knows what. So it's wet alone. But then under watch, if you suddenly act as though that you, whatever that is, and right now that's not important for me to discuss it, but if you act as though you and you alone, in some more complex fashion, are responsible for your inner operations, then you would have the reality behind what I mean behind the motto. It would be, I guess I can make it cruder than that. It would be a kind of acknowledgement that there are wet, chemical, unseen, crude, nonverbal forces that make me do everything I do. All right. Semicolon, at least. But always watching that, always having that awareness, continually, whenever I can, reminding myself to feel and to think bio, not psycho. That it's the chemical movement in the brain right now that has no words until I speak them, until my brain, until the dry part speaks them. There are things going on that make me do what I do. All right, I got that. So wet alone, but under watch. So I'm continually trying to keep the awareness, which I can feel is true. If you can feel it's true, then you can feel it's true. If you can't, then all you can do is listen. But I'm going ahead and operate as though I, and I alone, am responsible. Do you follow it? Now, of course, we have gone far outside the orbital reality of linear thought. That this is just impossible. You can't say that one thing, that X is true, and I'm going ahead and operate as though X is not true. You can't do that, right? Right? What the hell do you think you do all the time? Why do you think the dictionary has the word virtual in it? Why do you think virtual is, in case you hadn't noticed, surely is one of the most popular words in advertising. Some of you might ought to go look up virtual. But it, well, it's things, systems, or something that seems to have a particular effect, but is not proven to be, by word or deed, actual, that it's real. What do you think religion is? What do you think psychiatry is? What do you think all human institutions are? Universities, education itself, political aspects of human life. What do you think the feeling of individuality in your own skull is? It's all virtual. It seems to have an effect. The dictionary definition probably doesn't say seems. But it seems or appears to have an effect. Not to some deluded individual, some schizoid somewhere. But if something is virtual, like religion virtually seems to be necessary. Our religion seems to serve the virtual purpose of making people's lives better. then that seems to be true. People say it is, but can you prove that there is religion? Not just by some antagonistic, sarcastic look at religion. Can anybody, can supporters of religion show by word or deed that it's a reality? And the answer is no. Of course, they say faith. But you can say about all kinds of things. It's not just religion. Love. It seems definitely have effect. People die for love. You know, remember what Romeo did to himself in a moment of testing his blade. People apparently will die for love, but can you find love? Can you prove it exists? So back to what I was talking about, the non-linear, the insanity of saying to be aware that X is X, and then to operate as though X is not X. And then I did my little song and dance there verbally of saying that's silly and it's impossible. But it's not. People do it continually, but the difference is no one's aware of it. They can debate it, they can argue in one group, that is one part of life's nervous system through man, can, to go back to religion, say religion, you shouldn't even call it virtual, but it does fit the definition because religion's a waste of time, it doesn't exist, nobody can prove it. And so the other side, of course, can they say that? But that proves nothing either way. There is no satisfaction, there is no way that you can profitably operate by paying allegiance, by taking sides with either one of those. So what I'm talking about is not either one of them. What I'm talking about is not virtual. Now people operate on this basis without knowing it. That is, those who support religion, those who are generally wired up to support religion, for instance. Then we could take one view and say, all right, there is no provable such thing as religion. It's not provable. And we can say, okay. So then we can say, all right, these people that are wired up in life's body to support it, they are taking something not real and acting as though it is. And so if you could be that impartial for a moment, you could say, yeah, I see what you mean. But do you understand that means nothing? Because they do not look at it that way. They're not wired up to look at it in that manner. If you took somebody wired up to be religious and said, you understand that you are, no offense, but you're not really religious, all you are is a supporter in this area. This is an example of the virtuals of life. No, they wouldn't see it. Or if you tried to point out to a psychiatrist that, hey, you understand, no offense, because I might suggest to a relative or somebody that they come seek psychiatric help, especially if they were hanging around my house driving me nuts. But, my good doctor, do you understand there's no such thing as psychiatry? Now, wait, I don't mean that as an attack, but you know the word virtual. We'll assume a psychiatrist at least would fake it and go, oh, certainly. And you say, well, did you ever realize that psychiatry, amongst other things, is a virtual? It seems to have an effect. There are people who swear by it, people say they've been helped, but it's not a proven reality. Does everybody understand the definition? I'm not giving the literal one, I don't guess, from a dictionary, unless I've got a better memory than I ever remembered. Think about that. But it is not saying that there is no such thing as psychiatry. It's not saying there is such a thing. It's saying that there is something, the word virtual, that something appears to have an effect. Not a delusion, but it has an effect. I'll drop the appears, unless Noah Webster's here and wants to arm wrestle me. That it has an effect, and yet it can't be proven. It's not been proven to be a reality. So it's not an attack. But the psychiatrist would say, all right, I know what you mean then. I know what the word virtual means, or I hear your definition of it. I hear that. But that's not true. Do you understand? So he is not operating with any awareness. Or let us say I found an exceptional psychiatrist somewhere and I got a few gin and tonics in him and I pointed this out and he might say, you know what, I thought about something like that. I know I do good. Well, people tell me I do good and they pay me big money and I've started out thinking I do good, but to tell you the truth, as far as what goes on, even people that fall down at my feet and say they had some major breakthrough and want to kiss my hand, I don't know what happened. And so what you're saying about it being a virtual and not really being proven, you're right. You know, you're not going to tell anybody that conversation, surely, but you're right. But even that exceptional person, or under those exceptional circumstantial aspects, even if they would admit that, that still is not what I'm talking about, because that is not the basis of their operations. That is not the basis of their understanding of, in this case, their profession or psychiatry. What I'm talking about is really otherworldly. It's to have the awareness that there is a wet brain, there is a nonverbal, there is some sort of force and energy, not just running me, not just the crude parts of me and my liver and etc., but running what seems to be, by all accounts, seems to be the exclusive neighborhood of man. My Beverly Hills is running off the same kind of whatever it is, energy, that's running Harlem or Jacksonville or Panama City, believe it or not. It's to know that, but you don't stop there. It's not yes or no, or boy, that's wonderful to hear, or my God, if that's true, I'm going to give up. It's to have that awareness, keep it under watch, and then press right along in a more enriched manner, which you've got to have. I can say that, but you have got to already be more complex to be able to press along after that, one way or the other, is to press along after that as though, not what the dry brain says, not what the dry brain says the wet brain is making it say, but you press along, forget the wet and dry brain for a second, you press along as though you and you alone are responsible for all of it. Now that takes virtual and spins it like a deranged disco dancer, I guess, of 10 years ago. It is a complete otherworldly use of the reality of your own three-dimensional awareness of yourself. I mentioned that there are places with a similar kind of situation to ours, to man's, and they have a different ability, which I'm describing in a sense to you now, of being aware of such things as this, and then being able to operate as though something else was actually in control. That they almost can state and be aware of a kind of beyond my control basis to what I think and operate otherwise. And I said if you could do that in a sense, you would live less of a circumstantial life. But now let me point out, let's all be truthful. Circumstantial life, assuming you live long enough, and you've already all lived long enough, I don't see it, toddlers. Circumstantial life is eventually going to mug, it's going to cheat, and it's going to lie to kings, to priests, and bankers. Circumstantial life is going to get everybody. And I'm trying to give you by circumstantial, the externals of those kinds of things that seem to be stressful, frustrating, seeds for vengeance, being lied to, being cheated, being defrauded. Everybody is going to have that happen. It's happened to the Pope. It's happened to your favorite rabbi. It happened to your hero. Superman gets misled. People lie to Batman. Check it out. The Rockefellers, the Hunt brothers, hey, all three of them together got misled. Of course, they're not sure about who. So everybody is going to get hurt, in a sense, by circumstantial life. But if you let what seems to be these circumstantial aspects of life, if you let them make you dry brain serious instead of brain smiley, then be aware of this. You've been had twice. Well, let's take the kind of thing that is true enough by all wet brain observations, by all feelings of your own nervous system as it is being rational, middle-class human. If you're walking down the street and a bunch of several people jump out and mug you, that fits any definition of being painful, hurtful, stressful, psychologically imposing. Anything you want to say, I'll agree to. You feel like you've been invaded. And you can say, as many people would, well, it's not just the $50 they took off me. It's not just the watch. I just feel like, ugh. God, just these guys just jumped out, and just one guy pulled out a knife. And I couldn't do anything. God, if I get hold of them now, I wish I could go back. I wish I had a couple of drinks. I wish I had a 44 Magnum, and I wish I could find those same guys, especially after a couple of drinks, or maybe not even a couple of drinks. I'm so mad now. And life's not going to do anything. I know how our judicial system works. Nothing's going to happen. That is dry brain serious, and it is real enough. It is predictable enough. And I'll grant you, if you want this, I can say it was horrible. It's a terrible feeling. It's worse than, I don't know, drinking a Diet Pepsi. Or no offense to some of you, or having a Milwaukee's Best. Or listening to a Presbyterian sermon. I don't know. Granted all of that it happens in life when I say that everyone gets mugged and lied to by the circumstances of life. All right, so we'll agree that you've been had. But if you let the circumstances, circumstantial life, make you brain serious, which what we're talking about is dry brain serious. Now, wet brain can seek revenge, but it is not a memorable occurrence. Wet brain does not go off, it cannot, and think about those mothers that jumped you and how you could get even. Wet brain has either got to try to get revenge then, with no discussion, that it just simply, assuming that there's a kind of relationship that's getting too intricate verbally right now for me to go into, but some of you should be able to at least blossom out a little bit and see where I could go with this, that if the relationship between your wet and dry brain was such that at the time the wet brain could exert some influence, but it had to make an immediate decision, do I want to try and take these three guys? Of course, it doesn't think this, but it, am I ready to fight, or am I going to make an intelligent sort of withdrawal? That is, they say, give me all your stuff, and you give it, but the wet brain is looking. And right then it's seeking revenge in a sense. But that is not then what we call, that is, you people ordinarily call seeking revenge and being hurt. Because the wet brain didn't actually lose anything. You lost a watch and money. Now, watch and money, and it's quite all right to like your watch and your money or anything that you had, that's not the point. But the loss of a watch and any amount of money to your wet brain means zilch. Nothing. So it didn't lose anything. What it lost at the time was a kind of adrenaline waste in that it got upset. It got put in a position to fight or to run for it, and it didn't do either. It decided it couldn't run and it couldn't really fight, and so that's all it lost. You can call it a kind of energy drain there, which is not, it won't know the difference 5 minutes later or an hour later. But the dry brain does. The dry brain can then worry about it forever. The wet brain has no, it's not a memorable occurrence to want revenge. It either does it then, or I'll give you one more, you should be aware, if a week later or some other time later and you ran across one of those guys, the wet brain might recognize it immediately, and before the dry brain, if there was this kind of relationship within you, before it really had any time to think, well, where's a policeman, because I'll call him. The wet brain might suddenly run across this one guy and the circumstance be such that there's one of them by himself, and the wet brain might have you jump the mother. And so there it is, revenge again, but only on the basis that revenge is not a memorable occurrence. It's right then. But it's not wet brain that goes off and cries to people, which is ordinary. There's nothing unexpected to whine about, boy, God, I still have nightmares. I'm still mad. Every time I think about those guys jumping me, it's almost like I went through it again. I know. I almost tremble. I get so mad. I know. That is dry brain serious. You've been had twice. You got mugged 2 times. Now I'm being magnanimous with that, because you didn't get mugged just twice. It's however many times you go through this again. But at least twice do you understand that the occurrence happened. The circumstantial occurrence. By circumstantial, I'm talking about the external, circumstantial life. You got mugged. But now every time you think about it, you're re-mugged. And the only way you think about it is the dry brain. And the dry brain is the only one on a secondary level that lost anything. It keeps talking about such things as my watch, my self-respect. The alternative is this, still based upon a bipolar verbal use of my maps, is brain smile. That the circumstances happen, but any story that the dry brain comes up with, such things as, here would be two good ones that the dry brain could use, is that they in some way selected me. I mean, they were staying there in an alley, but I was over here, I was staying around looking at this newsstand for 5 minutes, and they were probably over there, and I bet in that time there must have been, in a city like this corner, there must have been 20, maybe 100, maybe 200 people went by before I finally crossed the street and realized what time it was and was going over to catch the movie. They in some way, those three mothers stood back there and selected me. That, don't give me this stuff about the circumstances of life that rains on everybody. That when it rains, I get wet, the Hunt brothers get wet. Don't tell me that, or don't tell me the circumstances of life will eventually lie to the Pope. Don't tell me that. They picked me out. That makes it feel worse. Sort of at the other end of that, but this will about cover the kinds of scope that I was trying to get you to consider in this. The other one is, after the fact, is the dry brain tells you such things as what fun they got. Not just a watch and not just money, but now they're off, and every time they think about you, they all have a big old laugh and slap each other on the back and think, well, that dumb mother. He stood right there and was over if he'd looked. Anyway, they just laugh. They got almost to form a brain smile over remembering me. They think it's funny. I can just hear them now, those kind of people. Because when they did it to me, I can just barely remember some of it, but it wasn't a big deal. One of them was kind of smiling. They didn't like they were afraid or like, boy, the police are going to get us any minute. Because I read enough, I know that hell if they catch them, they'll get probation. Can you imagine the laugh they have? Now that they're laughing about how upset I am, and I'm me worried about it. You've been had twice. You're supposed to be. That's part of what memory is for. That's part of what the dry brain is in charge of, clothing the nonverbal activities of the wet brain. Would some of you really care to remember something I mentioned twice that I encouraged you at one time to just directly remember and try and get a feel for the possibility that every time you're upset in life, that regardless of the kinds of things I poo-pooed about all of you being exceptional people in some way to be attracted to this, which, why do I keep downplaying that? Because if that were true, then of course that makes me more of a splendid fellow, that exceptional people, oh well. Do you remember that I pointed out that any time, if you could consider it this way, and I pointed out, anytime you're upset, anytime you feel like I've been selected to be mistreated, or that people are laughing at me, that I hear a voice out of a mob over there holler, hey fatso, fuck you. I know they're talking about me. Anytime you feel that, or anytime you actually directly get cheated, and let's assume for a second that you are one of the chosen people. You're in the general voir dire, you're in the whole pool of jurors, and you might get selected. Let's put it that way. Maybe you're not one of the chosen jurors, one of the chosen people yet, but you're this big general pool that they're going to get the chosen few out of, okay? Is to consider seriously that every time something untoward, hurtful, shameful, stressful, embarrassing happens to you, there's a test. I know that this is sticky to some of you, especially stripped of any apparent religious trappings. Because I'm not saying God's in some way trying to test people. But what if the forces of the universe are such that you might be able to hear something new? You might be able to get off this planet. You might be able to expand your nervous system. And yet here it is. Some just obviously very crude, unsophisticated dunderhead drives by in a truck, and there you stand, all seriously dressed up on your way to serious business. Perhaps to go down to swear to warn about those people that mugged you, all upset, and there you stand looking serious. And this old dumb-looking pickup truck goes by, and it slows down just there, you're not sure why, and this big old red-faced guy sticks his head out the window and looks you up and down and goes, they just drive on off. No big hurry, like, you know, almost slow enough that you could run and catch them if you wanted to. And you just see their heads kind of laughing in there, huh? Assuming, take your own individual case, the kinds of things that you are generally wired up to think, you call it feel, but you got to think it too, about that. Now what if this is life continual? Not necessarily the guys in the truck, although they could be. They could be on the payroll is what really makes it frightening. I'm telling you, they could be. But assuming it's continuing, that life, without having to watch you every second of the day, is just every week or so, does this kind of thing. And maybe every time it does it, maybe it doesn't even have time to watch, but it has got it set up to where every week or so something like this happens. But then periodically, it not only happens, but it immediately notices your reaction. And every time that you react seriously, that you get dry brain serious with this, you got to face it. There's less and less likelihood you're going to be picked out of this main pool for the chosen few. In other words, say you are thinking serious thoughts. Dry brain serious thoughts already, because it's already involved with serious matters, circumstantial in life. You're on your way to a funeral. You're on your way to pay the taxes on your property that's going to break you for the year. All kinds of serious shit. And somebody drives up real close and looks you up and down like there's some reason and goes, and you failed again. What more does life have to know? Maybe not even once a week. After you do this a few weeks, I don't want to frighten you, but life may drop you down on the schedule to maybe once a month then. But then after several years of the once a month, every time something goes and you get brain serious, life may drop you into the bucket over there like once a year that it pays any attention to this, because you just keep proving over and over that you're as common as the things that you think that you're rebelling against, that you're criticizing, that you're mad about, that you're as common as somebody. If, like I said, they might be on the payroll. You don't know. I'm telling you. But you take this as being just another manifestation. This guys in a pickup truck that pull up and look at you serious. Well, serious matters going on in your skull, in your life, and you're on your way to serious business, dressed seriously. And just, you can tell how stupid they are, how common. And to look at you for no reason, you're not, damn it. You just look at you and go, you've been had twice. Not just that, but for you to have any normal reaction to that, of what in the hell is going on here? How dare this happen to me? You fail the test again. Because you are now the same thing that you think is happening to you. It's not some kind of spiritual justice. It's simply you failed the test. You have become dry brain serious in regards to what seems to be circumstances. Whereas that's the way everybody has to be. Unless you can be subtle and realize you don't have to be that way. You can take those same apparent stimulus or a lie happening, and instead of it making my brain turn serious up in the dry part, it can cause brain smiley. To be aware of everything at one time, we got to turn the tape over. Be aware of that. Just a joke. How about there on tape? Some people somewhere are going to get up and leave the room and think, he looked right at me when he said that. I think how personally people take TV screens now. Used to you had all these ministers. I find it a little funny to say somebody sitting out there on tape will say he looked right at me when all you can do is look at the lens. I used to see these ministers that were going to have healing, and they'd hold their hand up and say, put your hand against your TV screen. And sometime recently I saw a guy that got a little bit better. He called out somebody's name. He said, I had a letter here. I assume they sent a nice contribution of Ms. RX in Little Rock, who was having problems with her, it was either her step-ins or a stepchild or her end stuff or something. But he called her by name. He told her. Said, you know, all right, now Ms. So-and-so, Ms. L from Little Rock, put your hand up. And think about it, as though other people are not going to cheat, that didn't send him any money, and think, well, hell, I need to be healed too. And that there are people somewhere that look around and realize, well, hell, he can't see me, they put their hand up. I mean, the world's full of cheap, common people like that. You got to face it. You ready? Let me try and wrap up another kind of verbal pointing, still talking about the same areas. If you could use this information and act as though, operate as though, your inner operations are your only operations, yours, and that everything else is background. Now this again flies absolutely in the face of all linear logic, even by my own setup for this tonight, of becoming aware that there are things driving me. The wet brain, I'm calling it now specifically about the intellect. They're driving me, and they seem to be, it seems to be, without any doubt, the compelling force. I feel as though it is. But then to operate as though I, in spite of that, my own inner operations are my only operations. Forget this thing about the wet brain. It's background. And that's it. It's operating as though not the dry brain is me. I didn't say that. You're just going to have to grab your own hole right quick. That my own operations, it's not dry brain, but my own operations are my only operations. Mine, the ones in me. The operations of somebody going at me, the operations of somebody lying to me, somebody mugging me, that's not my operations. That's background. And there's background everywhere. If the cartoon is of the president, or the prime minister, or the pope, all the cartoons got background. It doesn't matter what the background is. The background's finally going to step on everybody. It's going to cheat everybody. It's going to lie to everybody, if that's what you want to call it. That's what they call it in the city. That's going to happen. But to treat it as background, that which happens in me, that's the only thing that's me. The operations in me, that's me. That which seems to have stimulated, that's which seems to have caused it, that's not me. Now it may sound to be self-evident, but if you think for a second that you understand that that is not self-evident as a basis of intellectual operation, that is not the way you think. Because there is no distinction when there seems to be a magnetic, a personal connection between you and the circumstances. You know, if somebody else gets mugged, who cares? I mean, if you're going to stop here and it's some kind of contest, or I get my picture in the paper, I'll say, oh, that's horrible. Be sure and spell my name right. Yeah, it's terrible the way the cities are going downhill. But let's face it, there's a difference between me being mugged and some stranger, or you. You know, who cares if you're mugged? Oh, yeah, I care, but my God, it's not the same as me. But What if you could operate on the basis? Not faking it, because you can't fake it. You can write this down and try to fake it, but you're back with the dry brain hollering out the wet brain, hey, let's do this. Go ahead and do it. You got to be, may I say it again, extremely optimistic. But what if you operated yourself on the basis that, knowing all of this, that my inner operations are my only operations? And what seems to be either the blatant, direct, tenuous, vague, but whatever seems to be a connection between my inner operations and circumstantial life is no real connection at all. It's the background. You got to have it. You got to have the paper to draw on. There got to be something that apparently happens for me to feel like I care about what happens. There has to be something going on for me to apparently think about what's going on. But as far as me being mugged personally, as far as me being lied to personally, as far as me being laughed at personally, hey, I know. And I know my dry brain takes that shit seriously. Of course, I got to tell you, up until now, if you were good, you'd say up until now, up until very recently, I thought that was me. So you know, when I say my dry brain took it seriously, I took it seriously. I know, I took it seriously. But now that I found this kind of subtle approach, it's not the same. I got mugged. I got lied to. No way to justify it, no attempt to justify it. And me saying that popes, presidents, and everybody gets lied to and cheated, that's no rationalization. It's not to make you feel better, because if that kind of stuff makes you feel better, you don't deserve to feel any better. Or, if that kind of stuff makes you feel better, you don't know what feeling better is. Or, if that kind of stuff makes you feel better, Jesus Christ, give me a break. Or, if that kind of stuff makes you feel better, why are you wasting this film by watching it? More people that watch it, you wear it out. If that kind of shit makes you feel better, it's not that, but you've got to find your own subtle way that you can feel it. Not think about it, not theorize about it, not talk about it, but the fact. It's hard, I'll tell you one more time, we're not trying to talk this away, as hard, as hurtful, as frustrating, as vengeful, producing, anything you want to call it, as being mugged can be, as being lied to, as being cheated. As much as that has a direct effect on people, it's just a passing of energies. People don't lie to you. Ticks, fleas don't get on men to do you harm. It's to do them good. Muggers, regardless of what your dry brain can think, that, well, they didn't even need my watch. I happened to glance down, a couple of those guys had on rings and watches and gold chains. They didn't need that. Then you really get hurt. They just did it. They were just kind of smiling. But people do not, as a rule, in case you never thought about this, people do not do something. They don't act as ticks or muggers or liars or cheats to hurt you. They do it to help them. And there's not really that much difference if you thought I had pulled the metaphor too far. Of course, ticks do not have wet and dry brains, but a tick does not. What I'm about to say, if any of you believe otherwise, really, God, give me a break. But not just muggers. You don't really think that you're jogging out through this wooded area and you have ticks, or at least even one tick that just waits up there and sees people go by and see. And it checks its little tick watch and remembers that you come by, and it smiles and it sees you coming and it passes up. You got a nice woman out with a beehive bouffant. You go, no. And he waits on you, and he just sits there and he goes, you know a tick doesn't do that, right? That he didn't pick you out to hurt you. He did it to feed himself. People who lie, as you call you, people who cheat, people do not, this is not part of the normal scheme of things. I know it can be called otherwise verbally, but the energy transfers, the churning up of life that keeps life alive and growing in all of its diverse forms, and this place being big enough for everybody, including muggers and including people that lie and cheat you. And might I point out, big enough to include those who erroneously believe that you've lied and cheated them, right? It's big enough for everybody. In spite of that, there's a way that you've got to see that in this the circumstantial life, people do not, it's not arranged this way, people do not do something to hurt somebody else, to do them harm. It's to do themselves good. It's not that difference between ticks jumping on cows, fleas on dogs. It is not, except dry-brained seriousness can tell people otherwise. That's the stage of being had twice. Not only did I get mugged, I don't even think it was, they didn't look hungry, they didn't take my money. They didn't say, look, I'm sorry to have to mug you and take your money, but my wife and child's at home dying, and I'll try to send you the money someday. They just kind of smiled. I didn't think they needed the money. They just did it. They just did it to hurt me, to make me mad. But notice, many people are wired up to such a way as to want to even suffer additionally. It's nothing individual to you. It's certainly nothing psychological to you. It is the way life is wired up. But that is not why things happen. So you could have the awareness, back to where I was, the awareness that everything else is background. Circumstantial life is circumstantial life, and it happens to one and all. And to operate as though in defiance at the 3D level of the facts that what happens out here does affect the operations in here. Yeah, if you're ordinary, is to act as though that is not true. And the act I'm talking about is internal right now. It's not just behavior. It's to take your inner operations as being your only inner operations. You follow. If you can do that, I'm going to have to put words on it now, which is really slows it down and makes it get a little green around the edges. But if you knew how to do this, then you would take this whole affair that, all right, I got mugged, somebody lied to me, somebody cheated me, life has hurt me again at the ordinary level. No doubt about it, I'm hurt, that's it, I'm mad. And that caused it. I was not mad, not hurt until the person lied to me, until they just cheated me. Is to operate as though my operations are my only operations, mine. That is something else. That is something else. In absolute, reasonable, logical, intelligence defiance of the fact that the mugging made me upset. Now, I'll push it a little further and make it greener, but if you had to do it in words, it'd be like, yeah, I know. But if I'm upset right now, it's because I want to be. I'm responsible. If I'm upset, it's because I'm upset, not because of that shit. You know, they can laugh, they can stick out their tongues. My dry brain can tell me any amount of story it wants to. And I know for other people that's true, but that's not true. Whatever is going on in my inner operations right now, they're my operations. The rest of it is just, you know, it's rain, it's humidity, it's the atmospheric pressure, it's the time of day, it's circumstances. But that being in some way related right now to my inner operations, no. It's almost as though you have bypassed, short-circuited the ordinary operations of the dry brain, and that you're aware of the fact that I am living with a wet basement. If you don't like the swamp and the chemical, but it's like I am here, and the basement is always flooded. When I got here, it was flooded. And there's like little wave motions. God knows what goes on down there. I don't fool with it. And it's always down there. It's always churning around. I can hear it sloshing even at night. And God knows how waves are happening in my basement. And I almost hear little noises like algae growing, whatever that sounds like. But something's going on down there. So what I am, the way in which I'm operating up here, And I'm responsible for it. An absolute defiance of the fact that that wet basement, that dampness there, is what I started out with. One of the slogans is wet alone. That my motivations, my nourishment, my manna is not coming from heavens, or I tell you where it's coming from. It's coming from the basement. That's where it's coming from. I know that. But I'm not going to let me know it. I will operate otherwise. You could look upon brain smile as being a kind of extraterrestrial knowledge of the wet brain basis of ordinary intelligent people, man, with a direct perception, the inescapable reality of the dry brains serious perception of itself, which is another way of saying it, serious interpretations of the wet brain's movements. In some way be able to wrap all of this up, to understand the dry brain, everybody's, I don't care who you are, the dry brain takes itself seriously. Now, it can laugh, it can take a joke, which is another story as to why that happens. But dry brain takes itself seriously. It's supposed to. It takes its interpretations, as best it can make out, its interpretations, the verbal clothing it puts on the wet brain, it takes them seriously. It's got to. Those that are not wired up to do so, again I point to you, are those that are normally judged to be insane, deranged. Because you are supposed to at that level. The dry brain has to take itself seriously. When it makes some preponderance, some orotund statements regarding religion or the nature of man, and somebody in the audience stands up and says, point of order. You say yes, and they go, of course, you know life is not normally wired up for that to even happen. But the person, anybody, making some pronouncement, you are supposed to not be taking it seriously, but you take this seriously of somebody doing that. That is the part of the nature. That is part of the, if you will, genetic makeup of the dry brain, is it must take itself, which is its purpose, its operations. It takes itself, its purpose, its continuing piecemeal as it goes along interpretations of what's going on in the wet brain. You know, continually kind of listening to the sloshing around the basement. It's like this little growth, the canopy grown over a swamp. And it's like it's continually listening, and much more, much more ever going on than any dry mind, any dry brain can ever translate. It'd be like you trying yourself in a booth, I assume, and trying to be the announcer, the play-by-play announcer of, let us say, roughly, 2,300 football games going on at once. And maybe 4 or 5 baseball games and a rugby match over here, and you are in charge. You got the microphone, and you're in charge of giving the play-by-play of all of them. That is what dry brain is faced with. But whatever it's faced with, whatever it's coming up with, it's got to take itself very seriously. That's part of its makeup. It doesn't have any choice, which is another way of saying its function seriously, and the function being the interpretations it's making of what's going on. Like got the mic and it's trying to give a play-by-play of what's going on. And you can't joke around with this stuff. It's happening too fast, and it's just serious. It doesn't have to think about it. The announcer doesn't sit there and think, well, am I going to make a joke about this, or am I going to say, well, I'll tell you the play that just happened, but it's kind of silly and it doesn't really amount to anything. The dry brain, as far as they're concerned, everything that it notes, or put another way, anything that seems to rise up from the wet brain and motivate it to speak of it, is serious business. It has no alternative. It doesn't think, well, now is this serious or not serious? Or is this semi-serious or is this a little serious? Everything that drives it, everything that seems to motivate it, is serious business. It just has no choice. If you had this continuing awareness, and you could wrap it all up, the awareness that that's the way things are, you then got the key. Of course, in all areas, anything I can mention, anything that you could ever find on your own, anything that you could turn around and look upon in life, that you could separate yourself in some way from a kind of dichotomous reaction, any three-dimensional earthbound intelligence that you may have toward it, in any area, that's always the key, of course, is to be able to see everything that everybody else can see, not individually, but all opposing views, and there's mainly just two. You're seeing the overlap in the same way, remember, as binocular sight that I point out. You're seeing where it all overlaps. Your nervous system being exemplary of everybody's, if you belong in this, that you can see everything, such as, all right, I can see that I'm being motivated by things I don't know about, me and everybody else. I can see that, and I can see that the part of me that can talk and say, well, we should change, we should lose weight, we should eat less, we should change our genetic makeup. I can see that we are driven to do that. But I can see that you got to be optimistic to think that that has any effect in an individual life. I can see all of that. Now I can take all of that, which it is two 18-wheelers with their lights out doing 90 miles an hour down a one-lane street at each other. I can see all that. I know it all, and I can operate in spite of it. I can operate above it. I can operate around it. I can have an awareness coevally of all of it. Not right or wrong, not that one is more weighted toward reality or truth than the other. They just are. It is the wet brain, it is the dry brain. They're both there. One's not right, one's not wrong. They're there. And I can somehow be aware of all of it. And operate as though it were otherwise. Again, forget about behavior right now. It's operate in here. That I am not dragged on either one of these 18-wheelers going in either direction. I'm not dragged on both of them. I'm not being driven along by the possibility that they're going to have a head-on collision. Any other thing I can say about it? You keep adding to it. Yeah. All right, I'm aware of that. Yeah. What if you're wrong? What if they're going to pass when they get there? Okay, got that. Well, what if this whole thing's a dream? Got that. Yeah, but wait a minute. If it's a dream, then the rest of this is just insanity. You waste your time. Yeah, all right, got that. You're like the endless, not just a black hole, but you're like the endless GI tract. No matter what your own dry brain can feed you, you can go, yeah. It never burst. Everybody else finally says, hey, I can't take anymore. Of course, most people never even get past the point. They eat either what it is that, well, I believe so-and-so. And they eat that, well, all right. And then they hear somebody else, and what it is like they have offered them an alternative, like, wait a minute, it could be otherwise. No thanks, I just ate. I already know what I know. I already know what I think. I don't need you to offer me something else. I just did. That's technical talk. What I'm trying to get you to see, I start out tonight, the kind of subtle approach, is no matter what you apparently feed you, no matter what the dialogue through the dry brain apparently tells you, no matter what if somebody else tells you and you seem to be dragged into it, no matter what they say, you can still go, yeah. You're like the ever-active comma. Yeah. They say, yeah, but you always thought so-and-so. Yeah, you're right. And they say, yeah, but now there's proof of otherwise. Oh, yeah, all right, yeah, yeah. But do you realize that most people think you're nuts? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, you one time told me you'd never do so-and-so, and here you are doing it. Yeah, 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 yeah. It's like, all right, come on, come on. I said, but do you realize what you just said contradicts everything that you said you believed last week? Yeah, 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 yeah. But do you realize you can't have it both ways, damn it? Yeah, 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 yeah. Any of you that finds any of this a little strange, what the hell do you think, at one level, what all these Kyroots are about? Every time you laugh, what do you think it is? The Kyroots are going, yeah, 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 yeah. Well, the ones you like. The ones you don't like, you go, that wasn't very nourishing, or else you think, ooh, that, that made my stomach hurt, or that. Insofar as brain smiley, could I also point out that the more happy, smiley neural molecules you can produce, the better off it is, the better it is for everybody. Which is not really the point, but the better it is for everybody, and especially you attempting to do this. And every time when you find your own way, if you pursue this, of trying to think, picture, feel, and then be able to go, yeah, 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 because it's not any of that really. But to think bio instead of psycho. If whatever's going on inside of me right now, if I can just think for a second, and then next time I can remember it, I can feel, I know for a fact. It's chemical reactions in the brain going on. That's me thinking right now. I don't care what it's thinking about taxes, insults, life after death, philosophy. It's all chemical going on. Every time you can do that, what you're doing in a sense is freeing up the neural landscape for the increased production of those happy transmitters, those little happy messengers. The neuroprophins, I think they're calling it out in the real world. I always like that, the real world. But you are clearing a kind of space, literally, physically, in the brain for more happy messengers. The actual reality of people trying to talk to their own genetic system, which is futile under ordinary conditions. Of people saying, well, I'm just going to have to control my temper. Well, I'm just going to have to eat less. No doubt about it. I mean, some kind of subconscious trauma, I'm sure, that happened to me that I don't have time or the money to go into analysis to find out. But something makes me want to eat more than I should. Well, it's not psychological. If you still believe any of that, you're wasting your time here. There's no psychological reason. It's metabolic. It's molecular. It's biological. And the more you can be aware of that, the closer you are to, God forbid that I should have to say it, but of maybe having some sort of maybe just a teensy-weensy bit of maybe the impression that you've almost got a little, it's almost as though you could feel that I might be able to almost do a little something. Of course, while everybody else is doing large things, large projects. The rest of the world around you, everybody's building their own individual pyramids. Just single-handedly, just in tribute to themselves, no doubt about it. And of course, if it's not built right now, they got a darn good reason why. They can tell you why. Pressing right along, though, they're out there shouting at the sand, that is their own genetic makeup. These invisible laborers, on you huskies, come on. Dig out those rocks, pull them up there. Get this thing up before I die. Come on now. Well, it rained a lot. That's why they didn't work yesterday. Well, I had it almost built before you got here, as a matter of fact. I know you think nothing's happened. It was almost built, and there came a big old flood. You know, a lot of bad circumstantial shit happened to me. I got mugged. I got cheated. Somebody stole. The pyramid was half done. All right, everybody else is doing that. And then you might get to the point, all my little dramatics of maybe, kind of, sort of, and all that. It's like you might get to the point that you might be able to reach down in your own genetic sandstorm and pick out 1 or 2 grains and move them over a little bit. Everybody else fooling around with the pyramids and the Sphinx. You might be able to take a grain here and there and go. But I will tell you this, really. Some of you might be real pleasantly surprised and almost want to jump around and look like some of my little funny drawings to ever be able to do that. Because at the same time you do that, you look around, and of course you should have known it, and you'll go. You look around and understand that nobody ever built the pyramids. Of course, I could say the pyramids built people, but that's not really true. You look around and understand that everybody else has been in to a kind of discussion, shouting match, from their dry brain to their wet brain. That is, talking to their own genetic makeup, which maybe next time we'll get a little more into. I was going to present some of you the possibility, or all of you, with what all talk may be. All talk, internally and externally. But everybody else is talking about construction of their pyramid. I mean, not just talking about it, but telling you that it's almost done. Disregardless of the fact that you can't see it. Or, if you can see it, and you tried to ask, well, could you have not built this? What a dumb question. Of course I could have not built it. It took mucho effort for me to build it. At the same time that you find out that you undergo this most pleasant experience to be able to take 1 grain and move it, which could, by the way, if you want anything specific, you remember I used to tell you sometimes about you should try and be putting a serious jolt into your own system about every 7 or 8 years. By moving 1 grain, metaphorically speaking, I'm talking about, you might find out far beyond any kind of medicinal input, you might be able to change once and for all, if that was of interest to you, your metabolic system. To actually change something genetically in you, which is impossible. Even the Old Testament told you the truth, I think it was, that who can add an inch to their stature? Nobody. It's true. It just sounds poetic, if not religious, because everybody else says, well, that's not true. That's just a metaphor, because you can do something. I have almost built the pyramid over here. And you look, by God, it's true. But could they have done otherwise? Just between me and you. Never mind that. It's got to be between you and you. When you find out, if it becomes possible that you can move 1 grain of sand, then you understand that no one has ever built a pyramid except those who did. And it's the same thing as those who didn't. To have an awareness that it's bio, to try and continually think bio to yourself about your own thoughts rather than psychological. It's as though you free up. You give a kind of breathing room, a kind of space, literally, materially, in your brain. And it almost just happens this way, but I'm going to have to describe it to you, otherwise I already did. It gives the opportunity for you to produce more of those happy messengers. The chemicals that are happy, that make you happy, not everybody else. Fuck them. They're the same to circumstance. Of course, I said that's just a figure of speech. No offense to them or to circumstance. But nobody's trying to be happy to make anybody else happy. You can say you are, but if you do, you probably believe in pyramid building. To say that I won't be happy because, well, first off, what would make you happy? Well, if I had more money, that'd make me happy. Well, good. So that'd make you happy. Yeah, but it wouldn't be just me happy, because if I had more money, I could do a lot for my little nippers, my family, my little sweet wife, my beautiful wife, and my charming children, or is it my charming wife, my beautiful children, and of course my grandchildren, who I may never see. But if I could set up this estate, if I could set up a trust, and then know that for other generations, in spite of certain laws that they may not know about, but I could have my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren benefiting. Oh, that makes me happy to think about it. There's only one happiness. It's right here. It's not selfish, it's just a fact. The only happiness is not, well, I'm so happy. It's the greatest, happiest day of my life. Well, why? To see my son graduate from accounting school. Oh, God, no. From med school. The welding school. It's the happiest day of my life. To see my daughter married. It's not that. It's not the circumstance. You got to understand this. You got to have some kind of continuing knowledge of this by now. You got to start working on it. That's why I'm telling you to think to yourself that what I'm thinking is bio, it's chemical, it's wet. It's not psychological. It's not dry. It didn't just come out of some sort of unique experience only to me or to humanity or to my race or to my religion or to my sex. It's all swampy. It's gaseous. It's chemical. It's bubbles. It slashes around and it don't talk. I talk. This thing I call I, and all it does is try and take these 2,300 football games, 2 or 3 baseball games, and that rugby match, and it's trying to give a play-by-play description of it all. And to begin with the play-by-play description, you know the difference sitting at home on the radio listening to this. How can you compare what you hear of a guy just announcing one game to actually being there? The whole ambiance of everything, not just the game, but there's no difference. I mean, no comparison. So imagine the voice coming on the radio trying to describe the 2,300 games, plus the 2 or 3 and the 1 rugby and all that. The happiness, where I started the point, is just simply a fact. It's not the thing that people are wired up to have a continuing awareness of, even though theoretically many people now in medicine and biology and psychology would agree to this. When I point out, they go, oh, yeah, that happiness is not seeing your daughter do well, your son do well. Nothing wrong with that. But that is not what makes you happy. It's brain chemicals making you happy. And ordinary people say, well, so what? It's the circumstance that triggered my brain chemicals. Well, what the hell have I said all night? I know that. And they say, well. And I say, well, if I was dumb enough to talk to them. And they'd say, well. And I'd say, well. And then they'd finally say, give me a break, and they'd leave. I hope. Because that doesn't do anything. If that's all I'm trying to tell you, then everybody knows that. And they say, yeah, you're right. So? You're left then with a fairly, or it should be, uncomfortable possibility that, all right, the only way I can be happy is when things that trigger happiness circumstantially happen to me. Pope's in the same boat. But what if you could operate in such a way that without waiting for the circumstance, and even without putting the kind of morphines and other substances in your system that will trigger these. They'll trigger happy messengers. Alcohol to some people does it. Instead of that, but since all of you fool around with drugs and alcohol, and all of you have been happy at some time for other reasons, what if I told you there's a kind of happiness, which some of you have already been through, and I was calling last time brain smiles, that's even happier than morphine can do. It's even happier, it makes your brain smile more than the happiest thing that circumstantially ever happened to you. Which I hope many, many happy things have happened to you people. The day you got your first Corvette, the day you bought your first boat, the day you sold your first boat. It's no sailor's joke. What if there's a happiness beyond that? Don't worry about how much. How about just a little bit? And how about if you can do it? Because it is not out there. You've got to operate those, what I was telling you earlier, on the basis that, all right, circumstantial life is circumstantial life. You can't get away from it. Unless you're going to play this. It's there. You can't get away from it. It gets everybody. Just never mind it. Although you have to face up, which I've been facing up for you, things do happen, and at any ordinary level, you are hurt by it. You've been cheated. You've actually been robbed. You've been lied to, misled, and all that. Yeah. Is then operate as though my inner operations, that is, the brain chemicals going on inside of me, that's all there is. They're mine. And that is something else. Not even any consideration of the obvious and indisputable fact that the things out there, the circumstantial life of me and everyone else but of me, is triggering the stimuli in here. Yeah. So the fucking what? And I've dragged you people along all this time and you're still there to go, yeah, but you've already admitted that the circumstances out there can make you happy or unhappy. Let me tell you, no matter the externals, no matter the circumstance, the person at the end who can brain smile always wins. That's it. Mortals, supermortals, creatures that you've never even seen, they don't even have these terms. When the end of it, whatever it is going on, I hate to even say anything, but put anything in that, the game, the struggle, the battle, the affair, the life, fill it in. When it gets to the end of whatever you are conceiving it to be, however long the sentence is, however short, when you get to the end of it, whoever can brain smile wins. Variation and reprisal of that it is truthfully, and by win, all of you people should know that I mean that beyond the literal sense of the word. There is no word for what I'm referring to, so I'm just going to call it win. That is, as opposed to the muggers won. They know I got my money, I worry about it, I'm mad about it, and they laugh about it. They wouldn't know me if they saw me, or they would know me if they saw me because they picked me out. Either way, that they've won. Not only my money, but those bastards won. They're off scot-free, and they can laugh about this, and all I do is think about it once a day. And I get nuts. I get mad. They won. What I want you to see is it is important that no matter the apparent external, that is the circumstantial, no matter, you can't let them get you down. You can't let them win in this metaphorical sense. You cannot. You can't let your mother, your apparent mother, you can't let your apparent father, you can't let apparent muggers, you can't let any apparent aspect of circumstantial life get you down. That's a fact. It's not philosophical and it's not religious. It's not psychological, it's chemical. If it gets you down, if they win, you can't do this. I don't care how real it is, that something, your son, daughter, mother dies, and it hurts. Genetically, it hurts. But you cannot let it get you down. You cannot let it win. Not because of some theoretical reason, and you can't rationalize it away. Dry brain is the only one that knows, has any conception that it won or lost. So you cannot look to it for any assistance. It's the one that seeks revenge, or it's the ones that will curse death, or curse your apparent enemies. You can't look to it. The only ally you got is brain smile. The only ally you've got is to be able to have a completely non-linear, insane way in which to subtly operate, that you're responsible for your operations in here, and that everything else is background. Everything else is just off the record. Everything else is circumstantial. Everything else is the rain, the humidity, the temperature. And you cannot let it get you down. You cannot say that the rain won. I was all dressed up, got my hair all done, and it rained on me. Look at me now. You know what happens to wool when it rains like this? It's not just funny, and it's not small time. It's important. You can't let them win. You can't let them win. And whoever smiles, the real brain smile, at the end of it, they won, always. And notice how people will imagine consistently that the other person won, that the circumstances won, like with the muggers. Dry brain can say, well, they'll get there someday, the police will catch up with them, or God will get them someday. What goes around comes around, blah, blah, blah. And yet you will still picture, many people will, that they're still, whenever they think about it, they'll smile. That's when you are really defeated, chemically. It is simple. Life doesn't care particularly. It is a kind of flow and transfer of energy. But in this case, you got the short end. The heat, the energy, the potential energy was taken from you. And they got it. And you're participating. You got no choice if that's the level at which you operate. But you picture that they smile about it. That they've mugged so many people, they may not remember everything, but you just know they remember you because of how upset you looked. Or something, because you're a big nose or you're being overweight. You can just hear them sitting around having a few little shots of cheap wine, and one go, they start talking about what they did today, and one say, I still remember, you remember 2 weeks ago it was down on it was the lower east side. You met a little fat guy with a big nose. You know, he got his watch the way he looked. And they all go, ha! And you just know it. You just think it and you accept it as true. It's serious. This is important. They won. And you can't let them do that. And you do understand, it ain't them. When I say let them, until further notice, which I guess will be day after tomorrow when we tape again, until further notice, the answer, whatever your question is, the answer is brain smile.